Hello and welcome to another Magic Duels gameplay. Today we are revisiting our blue-red Sphinx's Tutelage deck, which of course is still a deck built around the card Sphinx's Tutelage, which tries to mill the opponent out, which is the alternate win condition of putting all the cards from the opponent's library into their graveyard, so when the opponent goes to draw a card from an empty library, they lose the game. And of course, Sphinx's Tutelage plus a bunch of draw spells to trigger the tutelage will make short work of the opponent's library. So in order to build around a deck featuring Sphinx's Tutelage, you need a bunch of draw spells and a bunch of removal spells for the Sphinx's Tutelage to go to work. So let's take a look at the entire deck here, including the additions from Kaladesh and Aether Revolt. We still have a Lightning Axe as a nice cheap removal spell that can deal 5 damage to a creature, and as an additional cost we either pay 5 generic mana or discard a card, but we do have a bunch of Madness cards to go with the Lightning Axe, so we can discard those and pay the alternate Madness cost. We also have Galvanic Bombardment, a cheap removal spell that gets better the more copies we've already cast, and since we are going through our library pretty quickly, since we're just drawing a whole lot of cards, it's gonna be easy to find multiple copies of the Galvanic Bombardment, so the more copies the better. We're also playing Jace Vryn's Prodigy, since he draws his cards, so it triggers the Sphinx's Tutelage, and then transforms pretty quickly in this deck since we have a lot of instants and sorceries, and then becomes Jace Telepath Unbound, which can also help us control the board and flash back some instants and sorceries from the graveyard. We're also playing Thing in the Ice as an alternate win condition, since the deck is still playing lots of instants and sorceries, so we can quickly remove all the ice counters from the Thing in the Ice, so it transforms into the Awoken Horror, which bounces non-horror creatures and is a 7/8, so this kind of acts as an alternate win condition in case we don't find Sphinx's Tutelage in time, so we can just kill the opponent with a giant creature, and also can just help us slow down the game a little bit, make the opponent either spend a lot of resources answering the Thing in the Ice, or just bounce all their creatures, which buys us time to maybe find a Sphinx's Tutelage. The card did get a bit worse now that Fatal Push is in the format, but I think it's still a solid inclusion. Then we also picked up Baral, Chief of Compliance in Aether Revolt, which does some neat things for the deck, making instant and sorcery spells cost 1 less to cast, which means cards like Take Inventory and Cathartic Reunion get that much better in the deck. And then the second part of the card doesn't do a whole lot in this deck, and it's also just a 1/3 that can maybe prevent some damage. We also have 1 copy of Disperse as a pretty versatile card that can maybe bounce our own Sphinx's Tutelage in response to a removal spell on it, and can also just bounce opposing creatures or permanents to buy us some time. Then Take Inventory, one of the key cards in the deck, can draw multiple cards the more copies we've already cast, and goes great with Baral and of course Sphinx's Tutelage. And another very important addition from Kaladesh is Cathartic Reunion, which can draw us 3 cards at once, so also great with Sphinx's Tutelage, can find us the tutelage if we haven't found a copy already, and also works great with cards like Take Inventory and Galvanic Bombardment, since putting those in a graveyard means that future copies of those cards get a lot better. We also still have 1 copy of Oath of Jace, kind of like an additional Cathartic Reunion, but it's not a sorcery, so it doesn't get a discount from Baral, and also just a little clunky to have too many of these 3 mana cards. Then of course the Sphinx's Tutelage itself also has an activated ability. In case you're out of cards, you can still use the ability to draw a card and discard, which also triggers the tutelage. Then another important card in the deck is Fevered Visions, which basically draws both us and the opponent a card every turn, but if the opponent has 4 or more cards in their hand, then the Fevered Visions deals 2 damage to them as well, so this is also a nice way to maybe deal with planeswalkers that are otherwise difficult to deal with for the deck. And of course, triggers the tutelage every turn and helps us find the tutelage. Then we have Fiery Temper as a nice removal spell that has Madness, so if we can discard this to any of our cards, we just have to pay a single red to cast the Fiery Temper to deal 3 damage to a creature or player. Then we also have Collective Defiance, which does a lot of things in the deck. We can basically use all the modes in this deck. We can deal damage to creatures, we can deal damage to players and redirect it to a planeswalker, and we can also, most importantly, make a player discard all the cards in their hand and then draw that many cards. And often we will use this on ourselves late in the game when we have a Sphinx's Tutelage in play, because if we can discard a hand with maybe 4 or 5 cards, then that's 4 or 5 Sphinx's Tutelage triggers when we go to draw that many cards, which can quickly mill out the opponent. But there's also scenarios where you maybe want to make the opponent discard their hand. Then we also picked up Baral's Expertise, which is a nice kind of sweeper effect in blue, returning up to 3 target artifacts and or creatures to their owner's hands, so this can buy us a lot of time, and we also get to cast a card with converted mana cost 4 or less from our hand without paying its mana cost, so we can play one of our draw spells, maybe put a Sphinx's Tutelage in play that we have just found. So a pretty versatile card and buys us a lot of valuable time. Then we also still have 2 copies of Pore Over the Pages, which draws us 3 cards. We can untap 2 lands and discard a card, so lots of Sphinx's Tutelage triggers, and maybe we can also cast one of our Madness cards. Then we also have Chandra Flamecaller, which is an additional sweeper effect with the -X. Can pressure planeswalkers with the +1, can also maybe just take out an opponent if we're on the damage plan. And the 0 ability is very relevant in this deck. We can discard all the cards in our hand and then draw that many cards, and in this case +1, so we actually get some card advantage going, and again a lot of Sphinx's Tutelage triggers. And then finally 1 copy of Bedlam Reveler, which costs 1 less to cast for each instant or sorcery card in our graveyard, has prowess, and when it enters the battlefield we have to discard our hand, so usually you want to play this when you're empty-handed, and then you get to draw 3 cards, so again a lot of Sphinx's Tutelage triggers. Then our mana base, 7 islands, 9 mountains, so slightly skewed towards red, since we do want to be able to cast those double red cards like Collective Defiance, maybe a Lightning Axe plus Fiery Temper in the same turn, so we do require a lot of red mana. And then 2 Wandering Fumarole, which can turn into a creature, 2 Sulfur Falls, then 1 copy of Geier Reach Sanitarium, which is an additional way for us to draw cards and maybe trigger the tutelage, also makes the opponent draw a card, so just helps us with a mill plan in general. And then 2 copies of Highland Lake for additional mana fixing. So that's the deck. Now let's jump into some games and see how the deck does. Alright, let's take a look at our opener, which is always tempting because we have the tutelage, but with only 1 land we're not gonna get there. So we'll have to try again. We can try and keep this one. If we just find any blue source, then this hand is quite good. We have the Fevered Visions, which is important. Having either Fevered Visions or tutelage in your opening hand does increase your win percentage significantly. And then Thing in the Ice can maybe help us not to die, and then we have some ways to interact and draw cards, so just hoping for an island here. Alright, Bedlam Reveler, not quite the card you want in this spot. Still drawing an island next turn would be fine. Maybe Cathartic Reunion would be a nice draw here, as our opponent plays a gifted Aetherborn, 2/3 Death Touch lifelink. Not the quickest win condition, and there we go, island. So I think we want to deploy the Fevered Visions here. Thing in the Ice doesn't really block the Aetherborn all that well because of Death Touch, so yeah, let's just play the Visions and hope to find a tutelage quickly, maybe a removal spell for the Aetherborn. Alright, Reunion is not bad. Also just helps us discard bad cards in certain matchups. Maybe the first copy of Galvanic Bombardment doesn't do much, but then you can just discard it to the Reunion, and then the second copy maybe deals enough damage to take out a 3 toughness creature. Opponent does take 2 from the visions, but they also gain 2. Alright, and we found a take inventory. So here I actually want to play the Cathartic Reunion, and I think we want to discard Thing in the Ice and Disperse, and keep all the copies of take inventory. We could also discard take inventory to make the second one better, but I think the more take inventories the better. I would just like to cast them. We're not under a lot of pressure. Opponent missed their 3rd land drop, and I don't think this is going to be a Thing in the Ice game. Opponent has black mana, probably have Fatal Push for the Thing in the Ice, and Disperse doesn't seem all that important here. So let's cast Cathartic Reunion, discarding Thing in the Ice and Disperse, and hope to find a Tutelage here. Did not find a Tutelage, but did find a lot of other interesting cards. So here I think we can just cast a take inventory, and then next turn we can maybe inventory plus Reunion, and go from there. So opponent also has a green implement, so there they go, they found their green mana in Woodland Cemetery. Might have been a little greedy to also discard our only interactive card and Disperse, could have maybe capped that. But I'm sure we can find a removal spell before it's too late. Opponent now also with a Scrounging Bandar, so they could be on a green-black +1/+1 counter deck. Alright, Baral is actually quite nice here, since that makes all these cards cheaper, but our opponent likely still has a Fail Push available. So we do still get to get the discount on one of our cards here. So I think we want to play Baral, and then use Cathartic Reunion, discarding Highland Lake and Mountain. And now our opponent can Fatal Push if they want, but we still got the discount on the Reunion, and we still get to go land into take inventory here. Alright, there's a Fiery Temper, we can go for that next turn, and here I think we still want to take inventory rather than Reunion, since we can combine the Reunion with the Fiery Temper. And see if we can find a Tutelage. Not yet, but we're getting close. Bombardment's also fine. We actually have to discard 2 hand size here, and I think we discard, let's see, Bombardment's actually not all that bad here, since it could take out a smaller creature, but given that we have Axe plus Temper, maybe discarding the first copy of Bombardment is fine, since the opponent's likely gonna move a counter from the Bandar, and then killing a 1/1 is not that appealing. Alright, so they did move both counters here. So Lightning Axe can still take out the Aetherborn unless their opponent puts an additional +1/+1 counter on it. Then we might have to use both the Temper and Lightning Axe. But we're still at 16, so not under a ton of pressure yet. They go with a Nissa Voice of Zendikar, I imagine making a plant token. So we should be able to just Lightning Axe the Aetherborn and buy ourselves a lot of time. Opponent may be holding up another Fail Push, but we're not really relying on creatures to win the game. And I'm actually gonna redirect to Nissa here. Alright, another Fevered Visions. If our goal is to find Sphinx's Tutelage, we want to cast as many draw spells as possible, which probably means a Pore Over the Pages here. Which means we can still discard Fiery Temper to the Pore Over the Pages and also cast a Lightning Axe. So I think we go with the Pore Over the Pages here. And see what we can find. Still no Tutelage. Let's untap a mountain and an island, I think. And then discard Fiery Temper. And cast that on the Nissa, I think. Still get to play a land for the turn. And I think that's just gonna be Lightning Axe on the Aetherborn. Don't wanna get too greedy here, and I think we can just discard an island. So not the best turn ever, but again, we're going through half our deck, and at some point we're gonna find a Tutelage, and then our opponent's gonna die rather quickly, and they don't have any pressure in play. So unless they go Verger's Gearhulk here, I think we're in decent shape. Sacrifice the implement on the plant token, yeah, that's fine. Attack us for 1, down to 11. And do they have a follow-up creature? They do, Winding Constrictor, so that could get pretty scary if our opponent has a bunch more +1/+1 counter cards. Still no Tutelage. I think we want to probably Reunion here, since we have a bunch of useless cards in our hand anyways. I think like this. Draw 3, still no Tutelage. Did find a Lightning Axe, however. So we could Lightning Axe, play a tapped Highland Lake, play Fevered Visions. Seems fine. And we could wait on casting the Lightning Axe on the Constrictor, but I think playing around a potential maybe Blossoming Defense or another pump spell is probably safer here. Don't need to take too many risks. So let's Lightning Axe this right now. Discard an island. Maybe should have discarded a mountain here, but that's fine. Play a tapped Highland Lake, play another Fevered Visions. Now we're drawing 2 extra cards a turn. And as soon as we find Tutelage, this game should be over. Still 2 decent cards here. Expertise can buy us a lot of time. And Temper as well. Tireless Tracker from the opponents into Aether Hub. So they get a clue token. And an attack for 1. And a Narnum Renegade, which they could have sacrificed the clue to enable a Revolt, but the opponent decided not to, so maybe they're holding on to a removal spell here. Still no Tutelage. Alright, so I think we want to Baral's Expertise here, and then maybe cast a Cathartic Reunion off of it. So bounce, we could also bounce the clue, but the opponent can just sacrifice it. So let's just bounce the creatures. And then cast Reunion. And discard, I think, just a land. Although, yeah, seems fine. And then probably just Fiery Temper at this point. And we could cast it. Would be a little awkward if we draw land plus Tutelage here. But I think I'm fine doing this, since we are dealing 4 to our opponent every turn with these Fevered Visions, so maybe going on the burn plan is not a bad idea. Did find a Tutelage and a land, so kind of got punished, but still found a Tutelage, so I'm pretty happy. And we could play Take Inventory, or we can wait and use it next turn with the Tutelage. I think we have enough draw triggers already between the Pore and the Fevered Visions that just casting the Take Inventory here seems fine. Might find more Take Inventories. Draw 2 more cards, go to discard. And I'm just gonna discard the more inefficient cards that we have in hand, which I think are the Oath of Jace, and I don't think we're getting to the Bedlam Reveler anytime soon. So yeah, next turn we can go Tutelage, and then we have a lot of options of how we want to follow it up. Nissa Vital Force is actually not bad here from the opponent, as they can hit us for 5 right away by untapping a land. So hopefully we don't die here. Do still have a Lightning Axe for next turn. As well as Chandra and the 2 Fevered Visions. So yeah, I think we're redirecting to the Nissa here. Alright, so if we play Tutelage, we still have 6 mana available. Then we can go take inventory and I think go from there. Maybe cast Collective Defiance on ourselves. So let's start with a take inventory here. Target our opponent, 4 triggers. Opponent with 23 cards left. So let's see if we Collective Defiance, targeting ourselves. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. 8 cards, so that's 16 gone for the opponent, plus we know at least 4 more on our end step. So that's 20, plus they draw a card. So yeah, let's escalate. Deal 3 to the opponent. So we will be discarding and 3 to Nissa. We are down to 4 cards in our library as well, so we have to be kind of careful not to mill ourselves. And now we go with the Fevered Visions triggers. Last card milled from the opponent. And here we can take a quick glance at what our opponent was working with. So it looks like an Abzan counters deck. And they go to draw from an empty library, and there we go. Sweet. On to the next one. Alright, let's take a look at our opener, which looks quite solid here. We've got both colors, we've got a Tutelage, early interaction, plus a draw spell, so can't get too much better than this. Up against what could perhaps be a mono red deck, judging from the avatar. And Galvanic Bombardment certainly great against a mono red deck. So Cathartic Reunion, also a great draw, so we could actually play Mountain to keep up Galvanic Bombardment, but I think playing the tapped Fumarole is probably better for us. And then next turn we still have the option of casting 2 Galvanic Bombardments. Alright, Glory Chaser, that's fine. And Expedite. Alright, so we kind of got punished for not playing the Mountain. Now the opponent gets to hit us for 1, and they got to draw a card. So had we kept up Mountain, we could have killed the Glory Chaser in response to the Expedite. Then the opponent doesn't draw a card, and they don't get to hit us for 1. That being said, I don't think I'm too sad, since we will still get to kill the Glory Chaser. If we wait, we could get punished by our opponent having multiple pump spells on their Glory Chaser. But if we do wait, and our opponent goes to put maybe an enchantment on their Glory Chaser, then we could get a nice 2-for-1. Given that we have 2 Galvanic Bombardments, I think waiting has its benefits. So now I will go with the Bombardment, see if our opponent has a pump spell. In response, they do not. Probably also should have cast the Bombardment before our opponent actually declared attackers, because now if they had a build to smash, they could have still used that. But I think we just jam Tutelage and hope our opponent doesn't deal too much damage next turn. And since they are a mono red deck, Tutelage will mill them out a lot faster, since we could hit 2 cards with the same color. Opponent hits us for 2 with their Goblin tokens and also Majoring Bully, which we do have a number of removal spells for. So we just have to try and survive here as long as possible. And we could Cathartic Reunion here, discarding Fiery Temper. I think I like that quite a bit. Can also maybe discard Jace, which is unlikely to survive. And then we still have the Bombardment and the Disperse for later. And try and take out the Bully here. If that works. Get to mill the opponent for a bunch. And we picked up some lands, which is nice. So the opponent also has a bunch of vehicles. Good to know about. As well as the enchantment I was trying to have our opponent cast when we were keeping up the Galvanic Bombardment. Another Majoring Bully, but they don't appear to have that enchantment, otherwise they could have given their Majoring Bully haste as well. So we're only taking 2 a turn. Sulfur Falls also not a bad draw. So I think we can take inventory here, see what we draw, and then keep up Bombardment plus Lightning Axe. Alright, Bedlam Reveler not bad. So I think we can probably wait, since we again have multiple removal spells for the Bully, in case our opponent goes to put an enchantment on it, or maybe tries to use a pump spell. And now I think I will try and use Galvanic Bombardment on the Bully. Alright, that works. I don't think we want to use any of our removal spells on the 1/1s here, but maybe we can do that if they go for a pump spell like this one. So I think we can Disperse here, since that gets rid of a token permanently. So they still hit us for 3. And no follow-up creature, so that's good. Another Bombardment. Meanwhile, our opponent down to 29 cards in library. Can take another quick look. So Sanitarium is a decent one here. Can also start activating the Tutelage. Bedlam Reveler doesn't look bad either. But I think we want to wait on the Reveler, try to use these removal spells first. And if nothing else, we can still use the Sanitarium. Opponent tries to hit us for 1. I think we want to use a Sanitarium here, in case we maybe find a Fiery Temper. And we do not. So I think I'll discard the island here. And then mill our opponent some more. I think I'll take the 1 and then end of turn use our removal spells if our opponent doesn't play anything scary. Titan Strength, we can respond with another Galvanic Bombardment. So opponent also doesn't get Scry 1. And nothing else, so that's good. Mill the opponents, and we actually get to play Thing in the Ice plus Reveler here, since the Reveler only costs double red. So I think that's probably fine here. And see if we can find some more draw spells. Bombardment's also not bad. plus Collective Defiance, so we could actually use Collective Defiance either on ourselves or on the opponent, but we still have the Sanitarium available. So for now we can sit back on Bombardment plus Sanitarium. Firecraft targeting us, not much we can do about that one since it's uncounterable. And yep, our opponent does not have the answer. So we can use Sanitarium end of turn. Discard a mountain. And only 9 cards left. So I think we want to use a Sanitarium here, or maybe we can Collective Defiance first. Target us. Also get a prowess trigger for what it's worth. And yep, that should do it. And now we can actually use the Sanitarium because it forces every player to draw a card, and with the opponent on an empty library we can just win the game right now. There we go, discard Reunion, and that does it. Sweet, on to the next one. Alright, let's take a look at our opener, which I don't think we want to keep. 5 lands is a lot, and no action. So let's try again, and yeah, I think we can keep this one. Not great by any means, but we have some draw spells, Lightning Axe, and if we draw Blue Source, this hand's actually quite decent. There we go. So let's lead with Mountain just to keep up a Lightning Axe. Up against Red-White, not sure what specific build. Could be a 3 or 4 color deck maybe. Evolving Wilds certainly indicates that. Alright, Mardu at least. And I think, let's see, we could play Baral. He's likely gonna die, but at least our opponent probably can't kill him right now. And then next turn we might be able to cast multiple of our draw spells, so I think I like playing Baral here. And if our opponent does spend a turn killing Baral, that's also fine, then we get to follow up with Fevered Visions. It's obviously better if you can play Baral and a spell that's cost reduced in the same turn, so you get kind of value from Baral right away. So it looks like our opponent's on Mardu vehicles with a Cultivator's Caravan, which is actually quite scary, since that can hit pretty hard, but we do have the Lightning Axe. So probably want to keep up the Lightning Axe here, if possible. So that means we can still play the Take Inventory and the Reunion. So I think we want to take inventory first, get more information on what to discard with the Reunion. Another Reunion, alright. So let's Reunion, discarding... Maybe we discard the other Reunion. Since next turn we probably want to play the Fevered Visions, and the turn after maybe the Pore over the pages. So we can maybe discard Reunion plus a land, or we can discard Pore plus Islands. Maybe I like this more. Yeah, I think this is fine. Since we only really need double blue for Pore over the pages. So now we get to keep up Lightning Axe, or we could Reunion again. I think keeping up Lightning Axe is slightly more important here. And might as well hit for 1 since we're not really blocking. And say go. So already got some good value from Baral. Alright, blue mana as well into Obnixilis. Alright, so I think I misjudged what our opponent is trying to do. I think they're on a sort of Super Friends build with lots of Planeswalkers and just Cultivator's Caravan for mana fixing. So that means that we probably don't need to keep up the Lightning Axe, and instead we should probably just play Fevered Visions and Cathartic Reunion here. So let's do that. Start with the Reunion. Probably want to discard the Jace now their opponent has an Onyxilus in play. And Highland Lake. Could maybe also just discard the Lightning Axe since their opponent's probably not going to have a ton of creatures going on. Could maybe keep the Jace, but again, if he dies right away, we don't get any value from him and might need the double blue. So yeah, let's discard these two. Draw 3, still no Tutelage, but Fevered Vision's not a bad substitute. And then we can hit Onyxilus for 1. And say go. Fiery Temper can also go upstairs and redirect it to a Planeswalker. Opponent keeps plussing. So apparently they're not that scared of Baral. Woodland Wanderer, so kind of got punished for discarding that Lightning Axe now. But this is probably going to be a 6/6 anyways, so probably couldn't kill that with a single Lightning Axe. And an Oath of Nissa. So perhaps the opponent could have tapped differently to also crew the Caravan and hit us. Find a Smoldering Marsh, that's fine. And we'll redirect to the Onyxilus here. Alright, Thing in the Ice. So, we could play Thing in the Ice, then play Reunion, discarding Fiery Temper. Start removing some counters from our Thing in the Ice. I think that's probably our best bet here. Play Reunion, discarding Fiery Temper and probably Highland Lake. And maybe could have played a Mountain instead of having to tap the Sulfur Falls here. So let's see if we maybe draw into a take inventory that we now can't cast. Alright, didn't get punished, so get to play the Mountain. And now we actually get to block the Woodland Wanderer with our Baral and also a Lightning Axe it. Could have also attacked, make the opponent block and then Lightning Axe. But maybe the opponent uses a sweeper here. And we can maybe save the Lightning Axe for another creature, who knows. Plus with Onyxilus, also picked up Baral's expertise, so that's a way to deal with the Wanderer for a couple turns. Opponent does attack, so I think I'll block with our Baral. See how that goes. And end of turn, we will Lightning Axe the Wanderer, discarding probably this Galvanic Bombardment. One counter left on our Thing in the Ice, redirect to Onyxilus. Take that one out. Opponent probably has removal for our Thing in the Ice, so don't have high confidence that he will flip and actually do damage. Another Fevered Visions is not bad. So don't actually have a way to flip the Thing in the Ice unless we just want to waste Baral's expertise. So I think I'm just happy playing Fevered Visions and keeping up our Garage Sanitarium. Could also play Oath of Jace, which may be fine here. Although the Sanitarium has the advantage of giving us more information on what to discard depending on what our opponent does. So I think I like sitting back on the Sanitarium. Also, we will draw 2 cards, so maybe we can just discard a land we don't need. So all things considered, we're not in a terrible spot. Haven't found our Tutelage yet, but 2 Fevered Visions is not bad against the Planeswalker deck. There's a Planar Outburst just to deal with our Thing in the Ice, that's completely fine. And end of turn we will use a Sanitarium before the Fevered Visions triggers, so our opponent has less information on what they should discard. And we probably want to discard a mountain here, I think. Meanwhile, our opponent keeps taking damage from the Fevered Visions. And there's a Tutelage, alright, perfect. So we can play Tutelage and already have a Take Inventory in the graveyard. Could maybe just play Oath of Jace over Take Inventory, since that's more mana efficient, but we could draw into more Take Inventories, I guess, so maybe playing the Take Inventory here is fine. And then play a land and say go. Alright, another bombardment. And we already have 1 in the graveyard, so that deals 3 damage right now. Ajani Unyielding can draw the opponent some extra cards, which is also fine. So they found a Nahiri. Alright, Nahiri is actually a problem, since that can actually exile our Sphinx's Tutelage, but they can't play her this turn. So we have 1 more turn to do as much damage as possible with our Sphinx's Tutelage before our opponent gets to play Nahiri. And let's see, these Fevered Visions, do we want to deal damage to our opponent or the Planeswalkers? I think at this point it might actually be better to try and kill the opponent with damage if they go after our Tutelage. They're already at 8, plus we have the Defiance, which can go upstairs, and the Bedlam Reveler, which is a nice creature. Opponent's down to 28 cards, now 24. Can take a quick look at what's already gone. So lots of removal. Fumarole's also not bad if we go for the damage plan. But let's see, Collective Defiance should do a lot of work here. Same with Pore over the Pages. So I think we want to Pore over the Pages first. And Pore over the Pages is pretty much as efficient as Oath of Jace in terms of mana. So might as well lead with the Pore over the Pages here. And then untap an island and a mountain. And we actually found Fiery Tempers we can discard here if we want to. And I think we do. And mill the opponent a bunch of times. And then cast the Fiery Temper, targeting our opponent. And can still play Sulfur Falls. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. So I think we can just collect the Defiance for the full amount here and also deal some damage to our opponent, since we're not going to use that mana otherwise. So we will be discarding. The opponent takes 3. And that's a whole bunch of Tutelage triggers, and if this doesn't kill them, then certainly we can kill them with Fevered Visions damage or Fiery Temper. So our opponent's not actually dead yet, but we're still at 17, and now the Fevered Visions triggers actually will be enough to mill out our opponent. Alright, sweet, so only need the one Tutelage to really win the game, but of course Fevered Visions did a lot of work as well. I want to thank you for watching, I hope you enjoyed this gameplay, and as always, have a nice day.